in various places and on the state website to meet all the criteria, and we will follow the agenda as outlined. We're going to begin with a public hearing. We're here to receive public comment on the declaration of property to be surplused and disposed of.
Please, you need the members of the public here.
Is there anybody who'd like to make public comment? Or yes, on this public hearing, okay? Seeing none, we will close the public hearing and we'll move on to the regular session. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, in which I will lead, followed by an invocation by Councilmember Shelton, and then I will conduct the roll call. If everybody please stand. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our Father in heaven, we're grateful for the opportunity we have to be gathered together as leaders in the community and as friends. We're thankful, Father, for the opportunity we have to gather in a free state where we're able to govern ourselves. We're thankful, Father, for the sacrifice that's put into guaranteeing those freedoms. We're thankful for the sacrifice of many who continue to serve in various capacities to increase our quality of life in which we live. Father, we're grateful for the responsibility that is ours to govern the affairs and the trust that has been given us by the residents of American Fork. We pray, Father, that thy Spirit will be with us this evening, that as we discuss matters concerning our responsibilities and concerns of the community, that we can be able to do so in a way that would uplift and inspire, in a way that will be able to help us come to good conclusions that will continue to bless the lives of those of whom we serve. And these things we ask and pray for in the Son Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Okay, I'll now conduct the roll call. Councilmember Hunter.
Here.
Councilmember Shelton.
Here.
Councilmember Barnes.
Here.
Councilmember Carroll. Here. Councilmember Taylor.
Here.
Okay, we'll now move on to item number 2, and that is the time we've set aside for public comment. Anybody that'd like to address the mayor, the council, senior staff, if you'd come forth at this time, please state your name for the public record. Seeing none, we'll close the public comment period, and we'll move on to the city administrator's report.
Mayor, I have nothing to report tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, item number 4, council reports. I'm going to start to my left with Councilmember Taylor.
I have nothing to report, Mayor.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Carroll.
I have nothing to report.
Okay. Councilmember Barnes.
Ditto.
Okay.
Nothing to report.
Councilmember Shelton.
I have nothing to report.
Councilmember Hunter.
Likewise.
Okay, well, that gives me lots of time to say that I have nothing to report tonight as well. Okay, so we'll now move on to the common consent agenda, consisting of the 5 items. It's noted this morning when talking to Tara Lee, there had been no changes noted to the minutes of the meetings. So do I have a motion to approve the common consent agenda as outlined?
So moved, Mayor.
I have a motion by Councilmember Taylor,
Second.
second by Councilmember Barnes, and I'll call for a roll call vote. Councilmember Barnes,
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor,
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton,
Aye.
Councilmember Hunter,
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll.
Aye.
Item number 1 is review and action on approval of a resolution declaring property to be surplused and disposed of to UDOT. Small parcels, I would call them somewhat derelict, but we're just trying to do some house cleaning for ourselves and for UDOT. Any questions? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
Mayor, I'd move to approve the resolution declaring property to be surplus and disposed of to UDOT.
We have a motion by Councilmember Taylor,
I second.
second by Councilmember Hunter. I'll call for a vote. Councilmember Hunter?
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton?
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll?
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes?
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor?
Aye.
Item number 2 is review and action on a resolution to accept or reject the CNN Taylorsville petition for annexation consisting of 1.313 acres at approximately 1700 North and North County Boulevard. Is there any questions that the council has for staff? This is just the entry-level first stage of annexation.
I am fine with the way that it's written, but I also want to suggest to the council that we could just not annex it if we didn't want to have that as something that we were dealing with.
I guess my only question is the applicant's requesting this, is that right? The annexation?
Correct.
And the underlying proposed zone is to stay in the PF, and it's going to be a school, it seems as if? Is that what I'm reading right?
That's part of the PF zone, so it's public facility.
Right. So I just didn't know what the benefit to the city would be. I know that originally we looked at that as commercial, and just from a property tax standpoint, bringing it in, and if it becomes, I don't know, a school right there, I just worry about the traffic and everything that's going on there. It just didn't seem like that was the right fit for the underlying zone, to be honest with you. It feels like it ought to be commercial. I know there's some feelings and back history behind it, but from the long-term viability of what's best for the residents, I just feel like that really does fit best in a commercial zone. So if we are going to go forward with it, I would have an issue with it staying in the public facilities unless we actually had a need for it from the city standpoint.
Okay.
Mayor, if I could interject, so currently that property is designated as the PF zone. So that would be, how it would be anticipated to be brought into the city is under the PF zone, because that's what the general plan allows for. And if the city would be looking to amend that, you would want to go through the amendment process of the general plan, which would go back forward through the planning commission and back forward to council at that time.
And I think that's what we had done to bring it to the PF zone. I think originally it was zoned commercial. And then when we had the thought of doing the fire station, we took it to the PF zone. I just look at it, again, trying to take all the emotion out of it and saying, okay, what's the best long-term use for the residents of American Fork? A commercial development there on the corner where we're collecting property tax and potentially sales tax seems to be the best fit.
Well, and I might just add my thoughts. I'm not sure that I'm certain that it's not going to be beneficial to the city to have public facility there. I think that's the long-term interest of the city is before we're done with the development next door, do we need that space? Do we have need for an additional, a precinct for the police station that's larger than a couple offices that are currently planned for the fire station? For me, I haven't had enough time or spent enough time, perhaps is the right way to say it, but I'm not sure I'm ready for a change in that in the master plan. Obviously, as has been mentioned, that would take a process to get to that point, but for me, I just feel like there's a lot of thought and time that's gone into the master plan that says that is zoned for public facility, whether it's I guess I just haven't had enough time to consider all of those options until for just one vote, that'd be kind of where I stand. I'm not quite ready for that transition yet.
And I think the only study that we've done, to my knowledge, was just doing a fire station up there. I don't know if there was anything else in the general plan that's been done. And I think that we had bought a larger parcel for future expansion purposes, but I would just suggest that if the city is looking at that, I would hate to hold up a property owner from his ability to develop a property just based upon what we may do. I would say that if that's the intent of the city, that we need to decide if that does have value to us, and if so, then we ought to enter negotiations and look at purchasing it. But I don't feel that it's the right thing for us to do, to hold up a property owner because of maybe some ill feelings. I'm not saying that's why you're suggesting it, but I know that's been discussed in the past, and I would just love to see that the best use of whatever we can come to for that property be in the best interest of the residents. So if we need to take some time, then let's get together and figure that out. But I'd hate to go through the whole annexation process going into the wrong underlying zone.
I totally agree. That's, in my opinion, that's exactly what I'm suggesting. It was zoned public facility prior to,
Then we went to public facility when we thought we were going to purchase it for the fire station.
correct.
So I'm unfamiliar with their ill feelings, so.
Yeah, that's what I'm
not-
saying.
I'm not familiar with that, but my only concern is before we annex, I mean, we ought to determine what's going to be, clearly the paramount issue there is the fire station, so we want something that would leave the fire station unencumbered and be able to have that egress, out and whatnot, and if that could happen with the commercial zone, then I'd be open to look at it. It just seems like that is the thing that's paramount, is making sure that the fire station is taken care of the way we need it to be, and then we can decide. I don't know if we're premature, but I just remember when we thought that was going fire station, that's when we changed that to the PF zone, so, or when we said that would be in the PF zone in the general plan, so.
My concern is the same as the one you've mentioned. If that goes to a commercial zone, I think the only kind of commercial that would make that piece of property profitable to the landowner would have to be some kind of a retail or some other thing that would generate a lot of traffic. And I'm not sure we want to put that kind of, I'm not saying it will be that. I'm just saying that's, in my mind, what the possibility could be. And I'm not sure we want to put that kind of traffic. I'm not even sure we want to put a school right next to it, if it was going to be a school. I hadn't heard that before. I had.
The school is just part of a PF
PF
zone.
zone.
It's just boilerplate language.
It's something that
Yes,
could be
correct.
built there.
Yeah.
So I guess the bottom line to me is, I'd like to probably see it stay public facility so we have control over it. But I don't want to see any kind of commercial retail thing there that would anyway, I've talked about just pushing cars off the road in the snowstorms. I think we'd have to push cars off the road when the fire engines are going out in this kind of scenario, is what I'm concerned about.
Can we put a plow on the front of it?
Has anybody ever done that? We could be the first.
Does Pierce put plows on the front? I don't know.
Come on, chief.
Well, I think that's my concern that you brought up, Kevin, is when you said, you know, the city would want to maintain control of that land, and that's the issue and concern that I have. If a private property owner has that, and we don't actually see a need as a public facility zone, that we're going to purchase that property and utilize it, then we should go back to what it was before, right? Things change. And we originally thought the county was going to sell us that property, and those negotiations broke down. We pulled an audible and found another solution, and so I think we ought to take a look back at that property. I don't know how a commercial property, it would have to follow all the same zoning requirements and everything else to make it safe, go through the same process, but I do feel for that property owner that, for lack of a better term, is being controlled by zoning because we don't have a plan for what we're looking to use. If I'm the property owner, I'm putting myself in their shoes saying, okay, if the city wants it and they want to control it, then purchase it. If not, then allow it to go
But
back to the
there's
zone.
no surprises, though. When this property was purchased, I mean, I don't know when it was purchased, but it was a
Yeah.
PF zone when the property was purchased. It's not like anyone did a bait and switch on this thing.
No,
So
I'm
it's
not-
like city's responsibility to take care of that. I mean, if buyer came in and purchased that property, it's the PF zone.
Sure. I guess
Where's the surprise?
and I'm not saying that there would be a surprise. I guess what I'm saying is, I try to look more of a limited government standpoint, right? What is the city's purpose in that? We get these great powers to allow certain things to be built certain places. And just because we can doesn't necessarily mean we should. I think that those powers come great responsibilities, and we should look at that responsibility and say, okay, if that's going to be zone PF, why? What for? What purpose? And if it's just to maintain control, then I think that's the abuse of power, in my personal opinion. If we say, gosh, there's a need for a public facility, a park, another police station, whatever that may be, then we ought to pony up and start looking aggressively at purchasing the property then. But for the city to go around and zone different parcels differently and then hold on to them just for the ability to control that parcel, I don't think is the right use of that power, just ethically speaking.
I do want to just clarify that zoning laws are for the city to control. I mean, that word can be thrown around negatively, but
Nope.
that's what a zoning is. And for me, that PF zone right there is part of helping to protect the asset of the fire station and make sure that it's running well. And that is a good, when you talk about the best interest for our residents, I also think that is a consideration for the best interest of our residents.
It's a good point, but I don't know if zoning laws allow us to not allow any development for us to,
Yeah.
if we're going to do that for that control purpose, then in my opinion, the best ethical thing to do is purchase that property. If we're going to say we want to maintain that no development happens on that property because our fire station is right next door, then we should purchase that property.
Right, but I'm not suggesting no development, I'm suggesting only public facility type of development.
And I guess that would be where the plan would come into play, but
So, forgive me, I know I'm the least of these, but I get this feeling that there's some kind of malicious intent here that I don't, that the city's holding off saying, no, that's it, I don't get that. Did we have some discussion I missed or something like that?
I do know
I mean,
that,
we zoned it that way because we were going to buy the property.
correct.
We didn't buy the property, we bought an adjacent lot,
Mhm.
but I didn't think there was ever anything, no, we're gonna hold out, we're gonna control this. I mean, it was zoned that way. So am I missing something? Because it just feels like there's a
Sure.
little bit of a,
I just heard a few off comments from some of the leadership saying that because the county wasn't negotiating, that perhaps we just always keep it in the PF and they could never sell it. The county did sell it. I don't mean to get into all of that baggage. I'm just saying this is now before us. I would rather put all that behind us and just look at it and say the city's actually going to put it in a PF zone. We ought to have a really good reason behind it. And every time we do a zoning, we have to put behind it our facts and our findings as to why that should be there. And I don't know what the facts or the reasoning would be there, other than if we need to define that. And if this really is PF the best thing and the city has that need for it, then maybe we ought to look at purchasing it. Does that make sense?
yeah, I mean, but like talking about purchasing that's completely foreign to me. I mean, clearly we bonded for the property that we did purchase. So I guess that's why I just feel like, wait a second, did we do something to obstruct something on this? Because the way you're talking about it, it's kind of, we're giving somebody the screws, and I just didn't ever understand that. I didn't think we did that.
I just think that if we keep it in the PF zone forever without any facts behind it as to the reasoning why, the future use of it being for a school or whatever, I mean, when something comes into a zone, we're looking at the reasons why it's going into that zone, right? And that's all I'm asking for on this, is saying, hey, if it's going into the PF zone, what is it? And if it is, the city does see the value in that for future expansion of whatever, then we ought to look at purchasing it. But I would feel like it'd be unfair to annex that into the city and then keep it to where it couldn't be developed because it's in a PF zone.
So you're suggesting at this point not annex that?
Well, I would suggest that the city look at it and say, hey, do we really have the need for it? I mean, why is it going into a PF zone? That's going to be my question. What's the logic and the reasoning behind it? What's the facts that's going to back it up, that's going to say this is why it's in the best interest of the residents to keep it in a PF? That's all I'm asking. But I think that from my understanding, and all conversations are different, right, that I look at that and go, I think that it would be a great case to be able to put that back into the commercial property. It's just my personal opinion. So rather than annexing it into a PF, unless the staff felt like there was a strong reason to keep it in the PF, we ought to probably be looking at annexing it into commercial.
Well, but those changing in zoning and those things this is just the initial application. And those conversations can be had at a later date as we have a public hearing, the applicant, neighbors can come and they
So
can.
can the application be changed then to where that gets put into a different zone? I mean, we're starting that process right now. I didn't know we could go and change that halfway through the application process.
That's a different process than the petition to be annexed, right? There would be an application, and then it would go through a rezone process, which would include the land use authority, the planning commission.
I think.
But if there's confusion on what the intent is and what the city's desires are, we could table it and have further discussion on what that really should be.
I guess I just want to address one issue. I think cities and counties, other government entities frequently buy property with the idea that they may need it at some time. We're still not sure how this fire station's all going to work and everything else. I know some people think they know every little detail, but it's not even, the ground's not even broken yet, is it? So it's got a long way to go. So to take it out of public facility to me seems a little early when we're not sure what we're going to do with our, totally everything we're going to do. And it may be 5 years before we know exactly how we want that whole corner, I'll call all of it the corner, how we would want that whole corner to be developed. So I just don't want to lose the opportunity to have that land if at some point we get to the point where we need to put some other facility or some other whatever on there.
And I guess that would be my concern.
And that's
I
just the
don't think
opposite.
that's a legitimate reason to keep it in a P. I think that's an abuse of a zoning law,
I don't think it is.
to hold it off for
That's
5
just
years.
my opinion.
Anyway,
Well, you know what, I'm gonna maybe just tag off David. I think maybe the best thing we ought to consider tonight is just tabling this and getting to the root of the purpose of the PF zone and the needs of that, and unless, well, I'm making that suggestion.
I was just gonna say, for me, I guess I don't have a problem with an annexation, with the understanding that I'm not ready, I don't want an applicant to think that I'm also okay, and I guess that's my point. They're not a part of the city, and so annexing it into the city as part of the master plan and change, and with the understanding that my perspective is that that should be maintained as public facility. That's why I don't want to suggest, go ahead, let's annex it and then do a bait and switch, then that's what I'm trying to protect by saying up front. Because right now, if maybe I'm wrong, but my understanding is we're talking about accepting or rejecting an annexation proposal. But I also want to make it clear that I'm not necessarily sure that I'm not ready to take it out of a public facility. So that's my only concern. If we're not annexing it, then because of the master plan, right? There's other options, I guess, for that property if they want to pursue those. But as it relates to our master plan, as I see it, that's where I come from. And what I want to try and protect is from a landowner to not have a concern that, we annexed it with the prior assumption that we could turn it into some commercial property only to find out, oh, now I'm paying city's taxes and.
well, that's why I said that that's the important key component right there, is it being annexed into that zone. And so I think that's, in my mind, it's more transparent. I think you're saying that same thing, to do it up front, talk about it before we bring it into the city, versus bring it into the city under a false pretense and the developer stuff.
That's what I'm,
So-
I don't want to be there any question that we're trying to, well, they annexed it only to tell me that it was a public facility zone. That's certainly.
Is the applicant here tonight, Mayor?
Yes.
Do they have any thoughts? I mean, this is their application, so I don't know if they have any thoughts to share.
I'm thinking, yeah, I would invite you to come forward, Kurt, if you'd like. We're at this point, this is such a preliminary process. I don't think that you really want to talk about what may or could be, but really it's just the beginning process of an annexation.
My name's Kurt Ostler. I am one of the partners in Siena and Taylorsville that owns the property. I appreciate your conversation tonight. I understand that, there was a couple of comments about, how did we get here and what's the assumption. When we went to go put the property under purchase, it was out of a bid situation with Utah County, and that was last June of 2021. My understanding was the reason it went into PF zone was because American Fork City was looking to put the fire department there. The prior zoning, and as I pull up and look at the prior zoning, it was supposed to be commercial. So I thought, and I'll have to take responsibility, that I just assumed that you were moving your fire station over to the Ken Stratton piece, so I thought this would come back to commercial. Now, I agree that you guys made a motion that appeared the year before, but that was my assumption, and I agree that that could be an error on my assumption, but I will tell you that I've had several national retailers that have come and looked at this corridor right here. You're at a lighted intersection, you're right on a corner. That, to me, signals commercial. Now, I recognize you're a body that's going to make the decision there, but I will tell you that to me, what's the best for the city is probably you get to make that decision. That's your what they elect you to do. But I'll tell you, you're leaving a lot of sales tax dollars and also your park tax dollars on the table, because the national retailers that we're getting called from, they're going to bring some pretty good sales tax in. And I did share with the mayor when I talked with him earlier today that there is a pretty good retailer that's pretty serious about it. We've had restaurant owners that, at first, that we don't have a car wash. We are not under contract with anyone. We won't go under until we know the zoning. But for me as a property owner, to have the city keep this as a PF zone feels like a taking. It feels like that you're going to go and put a zone on my property that I can't enrich or get anything out of. Waiting for the city to come and see if they want to expand. It appears when you bought your property, it was about 1.8. But if you're going to try to reserve it for a school or for a fire department, I don't think that's fair as a property owner that you're making us stay in a public facilities zone, because that's something the city should own. If you're going to do that, the city should then come and buy it. That's why it's public. The public should own it, not a private owner. Any property you have right now that's in the PF zone, I'm not aware of any of that the city or that a state or the school district would not own. But this would be a pit parcel that you'd be putting the burden on a private property owner. But that's my feelings. I'm just saying, I think, to me, it's a taking. Now, legally, as we've looked at some legality, it's not a taking because it's a zone application. You get to decide on the zoning on that. But it feels like a taking to me. It feels like you're coming and taking the property away from a property owner. Now, if you want to come purchase it and enter into it and put it in that zone, I would ask that if you're not thinking, I would rather, and I understand tonight's just, hey, do we want to annex in? But if it's not going to come in, if it's coming as a PF, we're not interested in annexing. We will look at other options. We'll go something different. I don't want to come in as a PF to have the city that we're beholden to that this is now a PF zone. If not, please come buy the property. If that's really your intent, be fair to us and come buy the property. That's my feelings.
So a quick question that I have then is, would maybe a better solution and way of process of going about this is first petitioning the city, and even we could do it as a city petition ourselves to look at that zone change on the general plan, because that's the default when you annex in, right? So the staff doesn't have any ability to make any changes. So if we made that change first, and then we could do the annexation into commercial, if the council and the staff at that point going through planning commission looked at it and said, yes, commercial is the best use of that.
Mayor, if I could, 2 points. The first is pursuant to annexation code, the council needs to make a decision tonight to accept or deny the application. But what could be done is potentially, so the recommended motion right now, condition 1 is if annexed, the property be annexed into the schools and public facility land use designation. Perhaps condition 1 is amended to read that it would be, if annexed, the property would be annexed consistent with the general plan. And then further conversations can continue if the council decides that you want to look at an amendment to the general plan. That can be done while this annexation is proceeding through. And that way, this motion is still valid because you were saying it needs to be annexed in with the general, consistent with the general plan. If the general plan is amended, then the annexation zoning would be able to be amended as well at the time of annexation.
What I just heard is we can go and say, yes, we're willing to annex, but can the applicant pull it at any time if it sounds like it's going to go into PF zone?
Absolutely.
I do that make sense before you make the final decision. I don't want to be underneath a city that comes in and takes my property. That's what I'm saying. If you're going to take it, why do you have, I guess my question for you, what other areas do you own that's PF that's owned by a private property owner?
And I think, just to jump in real quick, I love that suggestion there, Sherilyn, and I think that would be good. And I would guess my request to staff would be if we move forward with that tonight, giving you I'm going to call it a kill option for lack of a better term. You could pull out if you didn't like what zone.
I don't think you need to give it to them as part of our code.
That's why I thought that maybe was one of the processes, so.
No, I guess I'm just asking if staff couldn't be able to look at this and look at taking it through Planning Commission and bring us a recommendation on what the right underlying zone would be through our planning department, going through the Planning Commission. And that would happen, I would hope, before final annexation. Is that what I'm understanding, Sherilyn?
Correct. And part of our annexation process is that if council accepts the petition, the next step is really for staff to negotiate with the property owner to come to terms on an annexation agreement, which would include that designation. If the designation were not consistent with the general plan, then my recommendation would be to take that all back to Planning Commission for a land use change. And so that's why I'm saying today, if you want to accept this petition, to do it with the condition that it be consistent with the general plan. And that way, we don't have to worry about that process. One thing I do want to just note, there was a statement made that it's considered a taking if this is a PF zone. It wouldn't be deemed a taking. It's in the PF zone on our general plan now. The city has no obligation to annex this property into the city. And it's knowledge that this would be in the PF zone. So I don't believe legally that would be a taking. Now, being considered a taking by the property owner, that's an opinion. I won't speak to that, but it's known that this is the PF zone, so he would be annexing that property consistent with that knowledge. But I just wanted to make sure that that was out there.
Yeah, I guess this is where I'm backing up a little bit, because you talk about it being a taking, and, you know, when you're in business, you run risks. You knew when you purchased this property that it was in the PF zone. You made the assumption, as you stated, that that would be commercial. And you know what? In 3 months' time, it very well might be that. But the fact that, and this is where I'm going back to, is this underhanded tone I don't get. And you say taking, we're saying we're annexing you in. The zone is PF1. We thought we were going to purchase that property. That zone was stated, that zone on the general plan was stated months before you chose to purchase the property. And so, you know, I want there to be this copacetic working agreement. Hey, we're all trying to help one another. We're all trying to do the best thing. There's no taking. There's no, and that's why I'm struggling. Was I gone? I don't know. I mean, we made this change. We tried to purchase the property. We did not purchase the property, so we purchased the Stratton property. Nothing's changed. We didn't decide, oh, we're going to stop someone from being, you know, having a commercial development there. Basically, you know, as I stated before, I'm just looking to see what's the very best situation for public safety there, since that is our #1 responsibility. And then we certainly have to look after the residents and the people who choose to do business in American Ford. So I'm with you 100% there. But the taking thing, I'm not there. I'm not there. I'm fine sitting down and having a discussion and saying, no, this belongs in commercial, like it once was. Prior to, we were looking at multiple spots for the fire station. When we determined that this was the best one, you know, we jumped on board and we made that change. So I'm happy. It very well could go commercial, and I'd be just as happy as can be, because that's what it seems to make sense to. But
Sharon, let me ask you this, because of it being commercial prior to, and then it's zoned PF currently, consistent with the general plan, that plan could be whatever we feel is the best thing for the city. I mean, it doesn't necessarily need to be commercial. It could be
Correct.
pulled out of the PF zone into some other designation, but not commercial.
So as of right now, that property is PF. And so if you were to look to rezone it, it would have to be rezoned on the general plan before it came into the city under any other zone. Or it could come into the city as a PF zone, and then at that time, a zone change could be done. So even if it came in as a PF zone, and then a year later, council decided we don't need this to be PF anymore, it can go commercial or whatever, that can still be done at that time. I don't know that the applicant would prefer that, because it sounds like if it's not changed ahead of time, they don't want to come into the city, understandably so. But that would be the process. And so if condition 1 was changed to the annex, the property would come in consistent with the general plan. The general plan could be amended and the property annexed under that. So
I think it's a great solution. There's no other discussion. I'll move to adopt the resolution accepting the petition for annexation of the C and N Taylorsville annexation consisting of 0.978 acres and located in the area of 1700 North and North County Boulevard with the following conditions. That if annexed, the property would annex into the applicable zone according to the then general plan. 2 parcels 14,003,00 or 0400, 14,003,0402, 14,003,040, 14,003,0397, 14,003,0405, and 14,003,0403 shall also be part of the annexation. And the annexation agreement include the minimum dedications on the right-of-way of 1750 North and remittance of necessary water rights.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second, and I'll call for a vote. Councilmember Carroll?
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor?
Aye.
Councilmember Hunter?
Can I ask a question? I'm trying to make sure that I'm protecting that, because that was my whole point, is that I don't want to go through this process. I think I heard it correctly, but I don't want to put, you always have a kill option, but is that how it's going to be presented? Well, the city annexed me in, and I'm not saying you, right? Are we putting ourselves in a position where we have this, well, the city annexed me. They knew it was PF when they annexed me, right? I mean, that seems like I'm going to...
The other piece of this is not the annexation. This is accepting the petition to allow the city to have further conversations.
Then yes, I vote in favor.
Councilmember Barnes?
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton?
Aye.
Okay, item number 3 is review and action on a master lease agreement with Bancorp for the lease of 5 vehicles. Is there any questions that council has for any of our staff here tonight? Sorry.
Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve the master lease agreement with Bancorp for the lease of 5 vehicles and authorize the city to sign the necessary agreements.
Okay, I have a motion by Councilmember Shelton,
Second.
second by Councilmember Barnes, and I'll call for a vote. Councilmember Shelton?
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor?
Aye.
Councilmember Hunter?
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes?
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll?
Aye.
Okay, item number 4 is a consideration and an action to enter into a closed session to discuss items described in Utah State Code 52-4-204 and 52-4-205. Do I have a motion to enter a closed session?
So moved, Mayor.
A motion by Councilmember Taylor,
Second?
second by Councilmember Hunter, and I'll call for a roll call vote. Councilmember Hunter,
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll,
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton,
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor,
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes.
Aye.
Okay, for the notice of the public, we are going to convene downstairs for a closed session. Upon the end of that session, we will open up the door and we will close this regular session of our city council meeting from downstairs. So we would invite David and Sherilyn to join us.